you see a lot of different pieces of the business that if you worked for a major company, you probably wouldn't. You'd read about them, or your friends that you're having a beer with worked in HR or worked in the AP, or and is telling you. But until you actually do it, you kind of don't. Oh, this is not fun, or this is one part of the business I'm definitely going to hire out for, and just trust who's ever doing it.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, those are the challenges. I think the financial challenges are probably the most difficult for me because that's the part I don't really like very much.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't mind it. I can read a financial statement, but having a great CFO like we do
Yeah.
really makes your life,
So
much
much
better.
easier.
So, when you have your own business, whether you're large enough to have a CFO, or if you can't, getting a really good financial person involved to understand how businesses work. And I, I, I go back to that because a lot of accountants are really good scorekeepers.
Mm-hmm.
They'll tell you how you did, or at the end of the game, you lost or you won, but they don't coach you through it.
Yeah.
They don't tell you got to get a guy on third, or you got to change the midfielder to somebody who's better, on the attack side than he is defending.
There's that soccer reference.
Yeah, having a CFO like I've been fortunate to have,
Yeah.
has been great because he's not only a good person to get to the heart of the financial statements and help you get everything done. He knows how to talk to lenders, and he also knows how to structure the business and to adapt when you have good and bad things without being
Nice.
over the top. Sometimes you don't want to pull the trigger too fast, but you also sometimes have to pull the trigger eventually. So,
Yeah.
anyway,
I mean, that's one of the experiences that I've learned from you both of growing tracks is just relying on good people around you. And I think that you guys mirrored that for me as I became into this role and growing my own business on this side. But just seeing that when you have a good team and you've got people you can rely on and trust that kind of complement what you don't want to do or what you're not good at, it makes the whole experience so much more smooth and more enjoyable, I would say.
yeah, and I mentioned financial because that was the more
Right.
difficult parts that I dealt with
Yeah.
during the 80s and 90s when bankruptcies were. But having great technical people who understand how to get the products together. Bob Moody obviously is one of the key players, and of course Brian now is the president. And he was, I mean, he's only been around 16 years. Good grief, he's a newbie at Infax. Uh, but those people know how to adapt and really get to the heart of what the customer's looking for. And that's one of the key things that my father did, was to find out. It's one thing to try to develop from an idea. It's a whole lot easier to ask your customers what they're really looking for, and then steal the idea and really do it. Uh,
Well,
so
you always, I told our team this, and even when I was at Infax, I would share this, but I carry it to Trax is that we say our customers are our best developers. When you ask your customer who's using the system what works, what doesn't work, that's the gold versus you just sitting in a room with all the good minds, just coming up with the problem statements. It's actually listening to the people using the software.
Yep, yep. And I think your generation and Brian's generations are good at doing that
Mm-hmm.
because you've been around computers a lot longer than the previous generations. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, my generation didn't really start with computers until they were in their, well, uh, mid 20s, really. The stuff that we were dealing with were mainframes. They were not, you didn't have something at home. When you finally were able to get, a PC at home was, an Apple II, which
Yeah,
was,
long time
a
ago.
Commodore. And those were the two big ones. And that was in the late 70s, early 80s.
Yeah.
And they were a long way from what you're doing now. So,
That's so true. Well, so from a personal standpoint, I know a lot of people may or may not know, but obviously, small business, there are times that are struggles. I mean, you always tell stories of how, when there was periods of time when you would go out and mow the lawn. And I use that as an example because I just have such respect and admiration for the fact of when you have a CEO who truly believes in the company and truly believes in the people and willing to do every role in the business, that's something unique. So, what do you think some of the lessons that you have learned from a personal standpoint growing in Fax, during the good times, the bad times? What have you personally, grown from it?
well, that's a tough but a good question. Well, the generational difference between my dad and I, he was big on corporate real estate.
Hmm.
Um, I am not. I mean, we've seen the dynamic of how, and especially the last 3 years, where nobody wants to go to the office. So having an office building like we do now that's 60% empty, not our building, but just the whole
Yeah,
building,
yeah.
uh, you take a hit. We had manufacturing plants, we had tech labs, and all of those things. Um, all of them really never worked out long term. I mean, we
Right.
sold them and we made a little money, but from my standpoint, being lighter on your feet,
Mm-hmm.
being able to relocate, that especially after the last few years, I always felt we wanted to do that. Once we sold our last building I think it was in the late 90s, we've
Mm-hmm.
always leased space because it's just allowed us to adapt and enlarge to do as we needed, and relocate as our workers relocated. People leave, and do you really need a place here? Do you need a place there? Um, and I'm really big on networking.
Mm-hmm.
Dad was a good networker. I think I'm as good or better, just
Mm-hmm.
because he really enjoyed sitting behind the desk. I like getting out,
Yeah.
and building relationships, um, not only with your customers, which is obviously key, but also with your business infrastructure, your all the partners that help you succeed in business, whether it be your banking partner or your insurance agent or your bonding agent in our case. All of these things help to have that. So when you're kind of in a position where you need to call a favor, you can do that. And there'll be times throughout your business that you need to call a favor. I don't care how big or small you are. There's going to be somebody you need to call a favor and say, hey, I'm kind of right here, but could you kind of guide me here or give me a little push, or do you know somebody who could help?
Yeah, and that's a good I mean, out of curiosity, I don't think you and I have ever talked about this, but did you have mentors when you were starting out with Infax?
Some, yeah. I mean, there were some really good guys that worked at the company that were my dad's friends that were really sharp. They worked in some of the bigger organizations, and they were good mentors. I had some good sales mentors who were basically people who um, sold to Infax at the time. I mean,
Oh,
so,
okay.
because when you're manufacturing, you have a lot of suppliers. We
Yeah.
don't have as many now, but there were people that sold us integrated circuit chips and resistors and capacitors and power supply components and all of those. And there were some really good. I learned a lot from some of the really good salespeople that weren't pressureful but
Yep.
responsive,
Yep.
and were involved, and it would just check in to check in. And so I've always kind of tried to foster that philosophy. Even if we don't have a customer or we lose a customer, because you're going to lose customers, it just happens. Times change, people change. But I let them know that we appreciate the business in the past. It's not that we're sorry to see him go. I mean, I hate to do that, but at the end of the day, we'll be here again if you make a change and you want to come back. We'll steer here, and we'll gladly try to help you out if you need it. So you know how to reach us.
You taught me that, and I always remember this story. I remember opening my first bank account as a kid, and you took me to the bank and you sat me down and made me talk to them to open up my account, and then you made me get their business card and to introduce myself. And you told me at that point, you never know when you're going to need to build this relationship, and you're going to need to call on someone that you know at a bank. So you start to, and you've ingrained that into me as a little kid. And I think everybody in the industry will loudly say the same thing, that you are one of the best networkers that there is, because you do truly care about people. And I think that's what separates it. Is you can tell people who are networking out of just because they need something from you. You network because you want to help and each other. You want to have that mutual back and forth. And I think that makes it so much more powerful, that I learned from you. And I mean, I think everybody would say the same. You do care about the people you work with.
Well, thanks. Yeah, the key, I think, always in good networking is give more than you get.
Yeah.
You'll get rid of people in your network who always take and never give back. I mean, that's those
Yeah.
people you quickly just say, I'm not going to keep up with this. This is a taker. But I always try to give more than I get. That
Mhm.
way, I don't feel bad, first of all, about asking if I need to get something back. And if I mean, they always can't help you. I mean, you can't always assume that just because you ask, you're going to get.
Yep.
But it's always nice to have somebody to ask.
Mm-hmm. That
And,
is for sure.
and so, but yeah, networking is a balance, if not more on, to me, the giving side than the taking side.
That's such good advice. I think everyone needs to take that home more than anything. So to get a little bit deeper, okay, open, more personal. What does success mean to you? I know it's a
Wow.
tough question.
Um, Well, I mean, success changes over time.
Hmm.
I mean, success when I was younger was having enough money to take the kids on vacation,
Hmm.
to go, do something, maybe to get you a certain gift at Christmas. And I know gifts are just tokens, but, those were I'm kind of a, a me-to-me present person,
Oh,
you've got
we
to go. And but money is obviously, I know everybody says money's not everything, and especially when you don't have it, it's a lot more than when you do. But also just having good relationships, healthy relationships with people and friends. I've been really blessed not only with great business friends, but great personal friends who are still in my life if they're still alive.
know.
And I mean, I'm getting hip surgery, and the hip surgeon is the guy that I played soccer with in college, and moved him into his first house with his first wife, and moved him out of his first house after he broke up with his first wife. So, you know, uh,
I'm sure he's gonna love you telling that story.
his nurses are all, his PAs are in the office. Tell us more stories. And
He's
and
like,
the doctor's shaking his head. Mike, shut up. Just shut up. I said, "Oh, you better do a good job, or this is going to get really bloody here." Um, but our banker for years has been one of my close teammates from college, and we've all been friends. So having great friends, people that you love and care for, and I've got friends outside, as you know. We've got
mhm.
I'm kind of in the quasi music industry too, and I've got a lot of good friends that are professional musicians who I do a lot of things with, and we just do it. It's not for money; it's for love. I mean, we just care about them, and we like to do it. So again, it's part of the network. It's give more than you get, and usually you get back more than you give. So it's kind of an interesting thing.
Yeah, and so success to you is really building relationships with people. When you walk
Yeah,
away with good experiences, good people in your life, that's success.
yeah, yeah. That and a good dog will make your life good.
Milo? You talking about Milo? Oh, he's
Well,
sleeping.
Milo, don't get him barking. Mine's asleep here. She's
Yeah,
down.
he's sleeping too. Let's be careful. Okay, so moving forward, what is one piece or even two pieces of advice that you would give to people to avoid burnout? You've seen the world days of, it's transitioned, right? It went from working around the clock, sleeping at an office in the early days of entrepreneurship to trying to find a balance to people now working at home and struggling with that balance because there isn't really, a clock out time anymore. But burnout is real. You can get burnt out very easily if you're not careful. So, what advice would you give to people to avoid burnout?
Well, burnout today is different than burnout before, and I think
Hmm.
it's a bigger, it's an overused term, I think, in a lot of ways. But we went up and we go to the office and we'd work and we'd go home and we'd rest.